I don't know how many of you saw the movie The Perfect Storm several years ago. Did anybody of you see that? Like it was about fishermen in the Northeast, and they get caught in this storm, and the boats are sinking, and they all die in this storm. It was a fun movie. It was a feel-good movie of the summer, right? But I got excited because one of the people on the boat looked a lot like George Clooney, and that sounded kind of weird, but what I mean is that he drowned, and I thought, oh yes, no more George Clooney movies. But somehow he came back to life. I don't know, but it was based on a true story, as you probably know, about a cataclysmic weather event in October of 1991. As I understand it, what happened was around October 30th of 91, a low pressure system started gathering over the Great Lakes. And then another low pressure that gathered in the North Atlantic. And then there was another low pressure system boiling around down in Bermuda. And all of these systems converged to create this catastrophic, cataclysmic, perfect storm off the coast of New England. Now here's what I know about you and about me and about everyone. That whoever you are, you have either experienced at some point in your life, or you will experience, or maybe you're experiencing it right now, a storm, a perfect storm, a financial storm of some kind in your life. And financial storms come into our lives in different ways. Sometimes they come in terms of in short-term emergencies. And we're going to have many of those kinds of emergency, kind of like a low pressure system, these little storms. And for whatever reason, they sort of catch us by surprise. We never think that we're going to have an emergency. We never think that something is going to break. The car breaks down. And you're like, I can't believe it. This car's only got 175,000 miles on it. I can't believe that it broke down. Like I can't believe this microwave. I got it for $25 at a garage sale 10 years ago and it quit working. Like I can't imagine this. And we kind of like go into denial about these things. And sometimes they're short-term emergencies. And Jesus warns us of these things. In John 16:33, he says, in this world, you will have troubles. Just count on it. Just know that it's going to happen. And every one of us at some time or another has been hit by not one, but multiple short-term emergencies. But then we can also experience times of cataclysmic financial events that come into our lives. October 2008, one of the greatest storms that we have experienced financially in our lifetimes, and it was like the perfect storm. The real estate market just collapsed. It was absolutely devastating. At the same time, the stock market crashed and burned, and people's 401ks quickly became 201ks, and people didn't know if they would ever recover. In fact, many of them haven't. At the same time, as you know, if you remember, there was this banking crisis in the world of global proportions. And it was chaos. The number of Americans collecting unemployment benefits rose to record levels. Corporations slashed jobs, including us. People experienced one of the biggest workforce reductions since 1945. And it affected, probably more so than any, our state with the automotive industry, and many in this very church were affected, devastated by it, and many had to actually move away. So today we want to look at how to prepare for the financial storms as best we can, to prepare for these short-term emergencies that happen, and even to do all that we can to be prepared for these cataclysmic financial events that happen from time to time. What we're looking for here is how to have a measure of peace during the financial storms of life. And you know, there are over 2,300 verses in the Bible that deal with money, that deal with possessions, that deal with our management of our stuff. Jesus taught more about this subject than almost any other. And as we said last Sunday, if you want to go to a church that talks about the Bible and just preaches the Bible, then this topic cannot be avoided. And Jesus talked about this, and we're talking about it. Please understand, not because we want something from you, but we want something for you. We want financial peace for you. We want less financial stress and pressure. And I think that's really all that we want, right? That most of us don't want to be, like, we don't want to be wealthy. Although by the world's global standards, we are all incredibly wealthy people. But we just want peace. We want to feel as humanly prepared as possible for the storms that come. We want to feel like we're responsible managers of the money that God has given and entrusted to us. We want more peace. We want more pressure. And listen, we want the thing that's going to help us achieve those. And that is something called financial margin. Now, here again, we're not talking about trying to collect and amass so much money that we feel like we don't need to trust God. We don't want to make that mistake like that rich fool we talked about last week. We're talking about following God's very simple wisdom and God's plan to get a measure of peace and margin in our lives. And yet, sadly, of all the nations in the world, Americans have done the poorest job at creating margin in their financial lives. The Atlantic Monthly cover story just over a year ago called "The Secret Shame of the Middle Class" talked about how nearly half of Americans would have trouble finding $400 cash in an emergency. Without resorting to credit cards, half of middle-class Americans in a financial storm don't have $400 that they could quickly access. So I think that you'll agree. Whatever your opinion about money and about talking about money in church, I think that everybody would agree that we as Americans need a better, simpler, wiser plan. And so last week, we shared a simple financial plan based on God's wisdom and based on God's word that works for any income level, and it's called the 100 plan. And you practice this plan, and it's the best thing you can do to acquire financial peace. And again, as I said last week, if you are young, newly married, if you're just starting out, if you're in your teens or your 20s or your 30s, I am so excited because the things that you are going to learn and have learned, if you will put them into practice, trust me, can change your life. And so please listen and please take these words to heart. But the 100 plan, it's a very, very simple plan. And it's the 10 plus 10 plus 80 plan. And it's also called the Give, Save, Spend plan. And the whole idea is that you take that first 10% of your income, of any income you have. And the Bible calls us the tithe, just a word that means 10%, and it belongs to God. And you take that tithe and you give it to God, but through the church that you're a part of, that you're plugged in to advance God's purposes and causes in the world. And you honor God in all that you do. Listen, every time we earn a paycheck, every time we get an allowance, every time we win the $1 billion Powerball lottery, we're faced with a test, right? And the test is who are you going to thank first? We talked about we're not going to thank Visa first. We're not going to thank Walmart first. We're not going to thank Amazon first because Amazon or Visa or Walmart, they can't bless your finances. But we're going to thank God first because God is the one, when we let him take over our finances, amazing things happen. And so this is what we talked about last weekend. Now, sometimes I think we're tempted to think, and I had this question last week that if we tithe, then that's going to isn't that going to decrease our financial margin in our lives for emergencies? Shouldn't we first get a margin in the bank for emergencies and then we can begin tithing? And again, remember what we said last week, that the sequence is really where the trust test is. And so we give God to first, and it starts when tithing begins, because then we invite God into our financial picture and God becomes a part of your financial future. And so this week I want to talk about the second 10, how you take that second 10% and you set it aside and you save it so you're prepared for these financial storms that when they hit. Now, I don't think that anybody would ever say, gosh, I had no idea that we're supposed to save for the long term. I don't think any of us would say that. I think every one of us would say that we know we should do this. We know that we should have savings. We know that we should make that a priority. And yet again, sadly, we don't. Money Magazine recently said 1 in 3 Americans has $0 saved for retirement. And many of us live in denial that that day is ever going to come. And so what about a savings for short-term emergencies and things that come up so we can just pay for them instead of using credit cards, which is the enemy of financial margin and getting further in debt? And again, teenagers, those of you in your 20s and 30s, if you can get this now, like you will be so prepared for small and cataclysmic storms. Face them with peace, and you're not going to be in the mess that many of your parents and those of my age, including myself, sometimes find ourselves. You can do things differently. And you say, well, Chris, I'm middle-aged, and maybe I'm older, and I haven't done these things. Is it too late? Listen, it's never too late with God. Never too late to start doing the right things, and God will bless your intent, will bless your heart. And then next week, we're going to talk about the 80%, how we use the 80% to live on, and we're going to talk about that. But I want us to look at a part of the Bible in Genesis chapter 41. In Genesis 41, it's the very first book of the Bible, and it just tells of an economic perfect storm that hit in the time of a guy named Joseph. And many of you know the story of Joseph. Some of you might know it. You might have seen this play, amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, that talks about how Joseph's father favored him among all of his brothers and gave him this coat. And you can imagine that, how Joseph being the favorite son, how his brothers, which would have hated him. Like, you can just see Christmas morning, right? Joseph is getting an iPad or an Xbox, and his brothers are getting Chia Pets. I mean, they were not happy about this, and so they devised this plan to sell him as a slave into Egypt to get rid of him. And then they told their dad that he'd been killed by a wild animal. They hated Joseph. They hated him. That was just the first of many, many horrible things that happened to Joseph. As a result of that, however, Joseph was always faithful to God. And through a series of incredible events, even through some horrible trials and temptations, Joseph is favored by God, and Joseph rises to be the second in command in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. And God gave Joseph the ability to interpret a dream that Pharaoh was going to have. And that dream meant that there was going to be, in the land of Egypt, in the surrounding land, there was going to be 7 years of good times, bumper crops, prosperity. But then it would be followed by 7 years of economic storms. And so Joseph told Pharaoh about this, and Joseph said, you need to find somebody who's trustworthy to manage things, to get everybody through this time. And Pharaoh said, I think I found him, and that person is you. And so Joseph was put in charge of this food program so that people would not starve to death. And we want to look at what Joseph did, because it records in Genesis 41, sure enough, 7 years. There were bumper crops everywhere. During those years, Joseph took a portion of the crops all over Egypt. And what did he do? Say these two words with me. What did he do? He stored them for the government in nearby cities. And after 7 years, the granaries were filled to overflowing. So much grain that the people could not keep track of the amount. Those were the financial good times. For 7 years, bumper crops everywhere. But what did Joseph do? He stored more and he saved more. Joseph was wise enough to know that after times of prosperity, what goes up is ultimately going to come down eventually, and he prepared for the future. Now, if you and I are honest with each other, as I said, by world global historical standards, even in the worst times in our country, we are wealthy beyond what most people can even imagine. But I think we'd have to agree that right now we are living in somewhat prosperous times in our country. And yet, instead of using prosperity to increase reserves, to build a savings, to create some margin, many Americans, as studies tell us, are buying more and charging more and financing more and spending more and saving less to nothing. Proverbs 21:20 says, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. The wise man saves, but the foolish person spends. Another version says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but the fool gulps theirs down. Another translation calls this fool a dimwit. Well, that's pretty strong language. Take a look at this just to kind of get an idea of what we're talking about here. Our assumption is that most times in America, and this may not fit everybody, but the assumption is in America, as we work over our lifetimes, our income is going to go up. Like we all would love for our incomes to go up. And generally, the trajectory over time is that they do go up. But here's what also goes up is sometimes when our income goes up, and that is our spending goes up. And they sort of stay at the same level. We just keep spending at the same level of our income. And statistics say that regardless of income level, 8 out of 10 Americans live like that. That whenever we make more, we spend more. And if you live that way, there's no financial peace. And that is like 80 to 85% of us. And I mentioned last week, and I've talked more openly about it in other sermons on this topic. For Lori and I, that was us far too long into our marriage. And so what we need to do is we need to lower our spending, even maybe if our income goes up, to create this magic thing that we need to have financial peace, and that is margin. And Joseph was wise enough to prepare for future storms. He was wise enough to create margin like we see it in the chart. And then in Genesis 41, we read that the next storm hit. The last 7 years of plenty came to an end. Financial times, good times don't last forever. It says, then the 7 years of famine began just as Joseph had predicted. Well, listen, Jesus told us that we're going to have troubles in this world. He told us that we need to be preparing for things. Like a man who builds a castle would take time to prepare for it. And we need to prepare as well. But it said that crop failures in all the surrounding countries, but in Egypt, there was plenty of grain in the storehouses. Why was that? Because Joseph created margin. He used times of prosperity to prepare for financial storms in the future. And again, deep down, I believe that's what we all want. Almost nobody does that, though, because we believe that we can't afford to do that. We don't have enough margin to do that. And then we're unprepared when the storms come, and that just plunges us deeper and deeper in the hole. And so here's a little secret that maybe nobody's told you about it, but it comes straight out of God's word. And again, if you are young, I want you to listen to this, all right? The great secret of God's word is that you don't have to make a lot of money to accumulate money and to create some margin in your life. You say, well, where does that come from? Well, it comes right from the Bible. In Proverbs 13:11, it says, whoever gathers money little by little makes it do what? Makes it grow. Makes it grow. And this is talking about the miracle of compound interest. Albert Einstein said that the miracle of compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. That over time, small amounts of money can grow to incredible amounts of money through this thing. You don't have to make a lot of money to set it aside through compound interest. And so you have heard these examples, and we kind of brush them off because, frankly, when we're 25 years old, we're not thinking along those lines. But I implore you, if you are in that age category, I want you to listen to this. So let's say through compound interest, let's say that you're 25 and you start saving at 25 years old. Let's say you just saved $2.75 a day. Right? I mean, that's like half your Big budget for the day, okay? So let's say you did that until you're 65 years old, the normal retirement time, although probably by that time in your life, it'll probably be 95 years old. But let's say you do that for 40 years. At the end of 40 years, you will have saved $40,000. But you probably have heard this before with compound interest, that $40,000 would have accumulated to a much larger amount. Even if we factor in just the most modest conservative financial gain, that $40,000 would have grown to a little nest egg of $1.1 million. Now that's just with your coffee money, right? So that's why, at least on Sunday, you don't have to go to Big B's. You don't gotta have to go to Horton's. We've got it right here for you for free. Just trying to help you reach that $1 million mark in your lifetime. You're welcome. Okay, there you go. But it's an amazing thing. And of course, the key is to start it early, but it's never too late. The New York Times a year ago, this is incredible, did a story on a secretary who worked at a New York City law firm. She she worked till she was 96 years old, and then she finally retired, or she died. But I don't know if those were correlated or not, but her name was Sylvia Bloom, and she worked at a law firm. But one of her jobs that her bosses gave her was to help them manage their investments. And so what she would do is every time her bosses would invest in something, she would take a little bit of her money and she would invest in the very same thing, figuring that they're smart people. They know what to invest in. And so she did that through her entire working life, and she died, and then she left her estate to be divided between a social service organization, a program to help underprivileged kids prepare for college. But not even her closest friends, not even her family had any idea how much she had accumulated living in one of the most expensive places to live on a secretary's salary over her life. Little by little, through compound interest, she accumulated over $9 million, and she gave it all away to these great causes. And we think that our circumstances are too tough or too tight and we don't make enough money. That is absolutely not the case. So how do we create some margin? I want to share just a few things with you. And again, these are little things, but just looks for some areas where you can save. And further, as Steve so wonderfully said, never stop tithing, because that's not an option. You need to put God first in this area of your life, and then more than ever. And as we talked about last week, that 90% of your income with God will go much farther than 100% without God. And so what options do we have then to create some margin in our lives? And I'm gonna suggest a few things, and these are just simple things that anybody could do. But whatever the situation, what you need to do is sit down and realistically assess your situation. If you're married, you and your spouse need to sit down together and all cards on the table, and you need to be perfectly honest about what's going on. And then look for some ways that you can begin to save so that you can create some margin in your life. And I'm going to suggest just a couple of them, and things that easier said than done. I understand that, but I think for most of us, especially for young families and young people, the biggest thing that we could do is just to start eating out less than we do. There are a couple of things that happened recently around us that I love and I hate. Because it used to be, to go to one of my favorite restaurants, you had to drive 300 miles away. And then they put two of them just 40 miles away from us. And my other favorite restaurant, I used to have to drive 40 miles to get to it, but now there's one just 4 miles away. And I'm struggling with this, people. I'm struggling. Of course, I'm talking about, Culver's, which they put around the corner. I love Culver's. Lori and I went there one of the first nights after they opened, and it just so happened we went up to the register, and the guy who was waiting on us had his name badge on, but it said owner. And I was like, dude, you're the owner of this? And he said, yeah. I looked at him with tears in my eyes. I said, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming here. And he said, well, thank you for being here. And he gave us a coupon to free ice cream. So, you can't beat that. I love Culver's. But then the other thing, of course, I'm talking about, two of them in Lansing now, Chick-fil-A. Like, oh man, I have talked to some of you, and you're just like, Chris, we've heard you talk about Chick-fil-A. We went to try it for ourselves, and we just really don't know what the deal is with it. We just don't get it. Like, what's the big deal? And I'm praying for your miserable souls, but I don't know. I really don't know if there's hope for some of you. I just don't get it. But we all eat out too much. I think we all. Dave Ramsey said the average family in America would save over $200 if they just didn't eat out quite as much as they do. And so a few months of that, and there's your short-term emergency fund right there. You know what the biggest ridiculous charge at restaurants is, and I'm talking about sit-down places you go to, are drinks, right? I'm talking about soft drinks and like other drinks that other people drink sometimes. But you look at your bill at the end, and if you're there with the family, you're going to spend about $15 on soft drinks. And I love Diet Coke, but I'm trying to drink more water when we go to restaurants, and I know what it's like, parents. You go there with your kids, and You say, okay, family, we're just going to drink water, and your kids are whining. They got to have their Baja Blast Mountain, whatever the heck the crazy stuff is they have. And you explain to them, no, we're just drinking water. We're doing it for our own good. So mom and dad don't have to go to the poorhouse. And so they keep whining, and that doesn't work. And so here's what you do. And this is what you do. You say, well, really, we're doing this for your own good. Because if we don't just drink water, we're going to have to come and live with you someday when we're older. That'll put the fear into them. So that might be one thing you do. We could talk a lot about, again, this is such an easy target. We're just going for low-hanging fruit here. And again, I say this not that I'm perfect at it, but like the coffee that you go to at Starbucks, like I love Starbucks, but you can get 3 cups of coffee at Starbucks, and with the amount that costs, you can buy a whole bag of Starbucks beans and make it at home. It's just such a lot of money spent on coffee. And God help my soul, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that they're putting a Starbucks in town. I'm praying that is not true, people, but like I don't know. So, but coffee at home, again, every Sunday we give you coffee, right? Not only that, but today we're going to feed you absolutely free, okay? So if you're here this morning, you didn't know that this was our Thanksgiving day, you didn't bring anything, that's fine. You're welcome. Please stay. There's plenty of food. Trust me. It doesn't cost you anything. So whatever that $30 or $35 that you would spend going to Qdoba or Culver's or wherever, not Chick-fil-A because they're not open on Sunday, but Culver's or Qdoba, take that $30 and start your savings fund right there. Just another little way to help you, and you're welcome. Okay, so everybody ought to do things. This is one everybody can do. And probably most of you know this because you all are smarter. I hope you're smarter than I was for many years. At least every year, everybody should call all the different companies that you have regular bills with, cable company, phone company, internet, whatever it is, and try to get a better deal, try to get a better price. A lot of times you call them, and if they think that you're ready to cancel, they'll give you a trial offer of some sort that will save you a lot of money. But your home insurance, your car insurance, shop that around at least once a year. Recently, we changed our internet, saved money on that, but then we were able, because of the better internet service, to go to streaming our TV, and we cut the cord from the cable company, saving about $50 a month. But it just pays to reevaluate. One of the things that we do that people might look at and say, Chris, that's just such a waste of money, is we've decided, Lori and I, that for her car, we're gonna keep satellite radio in it. And you say, that's like 20 some bucks a month. What a waste of money with Bluetooth streaming from your phone and all this stuff. And it is. But what we decided was that Lori drives 2 hours a day in traffic to Lansing and back, and I'd much rather have her just locked in on a satellite station than fiddling with her phone and texting and trying to find Bluetooth and all that. So it might be a waste of money for satellite radio unless you're a cheapskate like me. Because what I do is, I always, it's about $20 a month, but what I do is I get about 6 months of it for about $30 a month. Because what you do is you cancel it, and in about 3 or 4 weeks, they will call you back. First, they'll send you a bunch of annoying emails. You just ignore those. Wait till they call you. And then you say, well, I don't know. It's so expensive. And they'll say, well, here, we got a trial package, 6 months for $30. You say, that sounds great. I'll do it. And then you do that for 6 months. When it runs out, they'll turn it off again. I've done that probably 4 or 5 times, right? And it works. And so it saves about $200 a year just to go without satellite radio for just a few weeks out of the year. Check into your cell phone bill. Like I call at least every 6 months to Verizon, and in fact, I just called this last Friday. Thought I better do this if I'm telling everybody else to do it. It's been a while since I did it. I called them, was able to shave $25 a month off my bill. I mean, just amazing the things that you can do if you just take some time and to call these places. I think one of the biggest challenges that most of us have to saving for short-term and long-term retirement is credit card debt. And that's a big topic, and there's a lot can be said about that. But there are ways to get out from under that, maybe that you haven't thought of, and I'd love to chat with you or point you in the direction of some resources if that is your situation. But 80% of Americans, 80% of us are under constant financial stress. And I want to tell you one thing that I learned, especially when it comes to savings, is that what I prioritize, I automate. What I prioritize, I automate. And so, for example, Lori works for the state, my wife, and we have a portion of her paycheck automatically deducted, have it set up that every year in January, that percentage goes up 1 point. We don't even notice it. The amount gone until we look at the statements from her retirement and see it increasing because of compound interest. But automate things that are important to you so you don't forget them, you don't think about them, and you don't have a choice, you just do. And I think one of the other things that many of you have, from what I understand, have taken advantage of is to automate your giving as well through Easy Tithe. If you're not familiar with that, you can just go to fccgive.org and you can see how it works. But the percentage who are giving online is increasing all the time. It's so easy. You don't have to automate it, but you can. And you can download the Easy Tithe app. In fact, in your bulletins, there's a form and an envelope. I want you to take those out for a minute. Steve mentioned them just a little bit ago. But I want you to look just at the bottom part of that form first. And on that is a little picture that gives ways that if you haven't already taken advantage of it, you can begin to give electronically. It's a lot easier. There's a lot of advantages to it. But that will kind of show you how to do that. If that is something that you haven't yet done and you're having a hard time with it, you'd like information about it, or you just need some help, please let us know. But it's really easy to do. You can give through the Easy Tithe app. You can download onto your phone. You can go to fccgive.org. You can even text it to a phone number. But there's information there that you can get to be set up with that. But last week, as Steve mentioned, I announced something called the 100-Day Tithing Challenge. Now, this, again, is a real thing. It's not a gimmick. Many people have done this over the last few years. If it will help you to take a step of faith in giving God that first 10%, we're going to offer you this guarantee that if you try tithing, if you try giving 1/10 of your income to God, and if you, at the end of that period from January to about middle of April, if you believe in that 100-day period that God has not blessed you, if you've missed the money, or if any way you feel like God has not provided for you as he promises to do, then at the end of that period, no questions asked, you contact the church and you'll be refunded the money that you gave during that period. Now, we do need to have this is a serious thing. We do need to have record that you took the challenge. And so the first part of that form, you can separate that and fill out the first part of the form. And check whatever box would apply to you. Put that form in the envelope, and you can put that envelope in the offering plate over the next few Sundays as you think about it and pray about taking this challenge, or just somehow return it back to the church. There's only 2 people, this is between you and God, there's only 2 people just for the purposes so that we can know who took the challenge to refund your money if you want it back. There's only 2 people in the church who will know that you took the challenge, and I am not one of them, okay? This is between you and God, but we do have to have some way to verify that you did give. So during this period, you have to do your tithing either with a check or do it online, so there are records of your giving. Like, you can't come back and say, I donated $20,000 cash and I want it all back. Like that, that's just it's not going to work, right? Because this is it's a very, very serious thing. And so that is something you could think about, pray about, talk as husband and wife or whatever about that. But this is a very, very serious challenge. The first year we did this, about 30, and this is about, I think, 3 years ago, about 35 people took this challenge. And I heard some amazing stories of what God was doing. Now, again, this is not getting rich. This is not we don't give just to get. But this is about putting God first and understanding that he will provide for us. He will bless us. And that when we take that money, we put him in charge of our finances. And there were some really, really cool stories connected with that at that time. And I want to show you just one video of one family that took that challenge. And so take a couple minutes let's just watch this together, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, I'm Mindy Zofchek, and I've been going to First Church of Christ for about 12 years. I'm married, have a husband and a daughter who also go here at First Church of Christ. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was an elder, so we kind of grew up knowing the importance of giving, and we were taught at a very young age that giving is part of worshiping God and obedience to God and trusting God. And so my family has always given money to the church on a regular basis, but I personally didn't give as much as I should have or could have. We had a sermon one Sunday and we were offered a 90-day challenge, and the challenge was to give an amount of 10% of our income. And this was kind of the push for us, for me and my family. You know, it was scary, and when you added it up, it was a lot of money. But this was really kind of the turning point for us. So we accepted the 90-day challenge, made the commitment, and we had some really amazing things that started happening in our lives. We came home one day and picked up the mail, and we had a letter from our mortgage company. And we opened up the letter, and basically what it said was, hey, you've paid too much on your mortgage. We made a mistake on your payments. Here's $350. And we had a check in the mail, just completely out of the blue. About 2 weeks after that, my boss called me into her office and wanted to tell me that she was promoting me at my job. There was no more responsibility. It was just, hey, you're an officer now. And at the end of the conversation, she told me, this also comes with a pretty significant raise on top of it. And it was completely unexpected, totally out of the blue, and obviously a God thing. It's pretty incredible how things start happening in your life when you put your faith, put your trust in God, and kind of let go of some of that. And things like this happen all the time. It's not just monetary. I'm not going to argue with anybody. It's not easy to write that check every week. It's tough. It's a commitment. It takes a lot of dedication. But you really have to think of it as putting an investment in your faith. One of the things that we have taken advantage of is the app that you can use on your smartphone. It's called Easy Tithe, and it's super easy. All you do is click on the icon and you go to it, and you can put your banking information, whether it be a checking account or whatever. You put the information in there, and all you have to do the next time is click the app, hit how much you want to give, and hit OK, and it's completely done. The best thing about the church is not only the people, but just all the support that you get. You know, I've gone through some health things, and everybody just kind of wraps their arms around you when you have problems and when you have something going on in your life, and you can just tell that it's a big family, and there's a lot of love that surrounds everyone here at the church. It's home for us.
You know, during the Crusades back in the Middle Ages, many crusaders that were fighting these holy wars, they called them, were actually hired guns of a sort. They were mercenaries. And one of the rules was that if you were to fight in the Crusades, you had to be baptized and able to fight and to be able to fight in the war. And make no mistake, it was a terrible war. People did horrible things in the name of God during that time. But when many of these hired mercenaries were baptized, what they would do is they would go down into the water, but they would hold their sword up out of the water, as if to say, like, I'm this part of me is not going to go under. Like, I'm not going to quit being who I am. I'm still going to be a fighter. I'm still going to be a soldier. This is not going to get baptized, even though the rest of me is going under the water. And I think sometimes those of us who follow Jesus, when we go down into the water to be baptized, it's almost like we're holding our finances out of the water. I'm not going to give that to God. God can have every other part of me, but I'm not going to follow God's wisdom. I'm not going to follow God's plan for my life in this area. And I would just encourage you and challenge you to do things God's way. Again, it's between you and God. You are loved and you are welcome in this church, whether you give $10 or $1,000 or no dollars. That is not what we're talking about here. Nobody, if you take this challenge, nobody's going to call you or write to you or ask you about it. This is just between you and God. And so I want to encourage you to do that. Again, if you do want to take that challenge, sometime in the next few weeks, turn that envelope in with your form, and we'll be encouraged to see what God does in your life.